Well, the newest envoy in the United Nations Security Council is British Ambassador Karen Pierce. She's only been on the job for about a month, but she's a veteran of the British Foreign Office and is seen by observers as a breath of fresh air amid the gray-suited diplomatic corps who walk the hallways over at the world body. And this morning, Ambassador Pierce forcefully and eloquently laid out the case against Assad and his patron, Russia.
The Syrian regime and its supporters are responsible for the gravest violations of international humanitarian law in modern history. They have used indiscriminate weapons, notably barrel bombs and cluster munitions, against civilians, and they have deliberately targeted medical facilities and schools, as well as humanitarian personnel and civilian objects. It has defied the Security Council, and it has broken international law.
Ambassador Pierce also pointedly blamed Russia for what she says was, quote, shameful deceit, denial, and disinformation in its support of Assad. Meantime, the Security Council then later this afternoon rejected a resolution from Russia to condemn the airstrikes. But will they be enough to stop Assad and temper Moscow? Fox News International security analyst Wally Ferris joins us. Wally, good to see you.
Thank you, Eric.
Let me start with Russia. I mean, talk about chutzpah. And what's laughable, and it's so hypocritical, is they say this is, quote, an act of aggression against a sovereign territory. But what about the sovereign territory of Ukraine? I mean, they invaded Crimea. So where do you think this changes the calculus, if at all, about Russia's involvement in Syria?
Russia, since 2015, is not Russia before 2015 in Syria, because now Russia is part of the military security system. It provides the umbrella over the Assad regime and also over the Iranians and Hezbollah. Things are very different. Now, the Trump administration, which has 1 year and a few months of age, was not able basically to convince Russia that they need to sever their relationship with Iran and with the Assad regime, which is a very big thing for Russia. These are the only regimes in the region who are their allies, probably with some influence in Iraq. So now Russia will not let go of Assad. I mean, let's face it very bluntly. We hear the Europeans, sometimes ourselves here in the United States, calling on Russia to let go of Iran and Assad. It's not going to happen because they don't have any other alternative. So what remains, Eric, is a pressure first of all on Assad, and second of all, just to make sure that the Russians understand that we're not going to accept this behavior.
What type of pressure would you suggest?
Many have been debating the issue. It all depends on what we are ready to do. I mean, we could do much bigger than what we've done over, the past 48 hours. But reality is that the Russians now are so embedded with the Assad forces, with Hezbollah and Iran, that if we want to engage even the regime on the ground or further, we will be engaging the Russians. So we know that there are limitations. We don't want Assad to use chemical weapons, and they understand that. But we cannot do more with the Russians before escalating very high.
And what would it mean if there was that escalation? I mean, as I pointed out before, Assad took his helicopters. They're over in a Russian base, reportedly. We haven't hit them. We're not going to hit the Russian assets, and we didn't even take out any of his military infrastructure.
Look, rules of engagement are very clear, and it has been during the Cold War. It continues to be right now, unfortunately. If we engage with the Russians militarily, of course we can prevail in some areas, and they could also retaliate. Imagine it's not going to be only in Syria. It will be in Ukraine. It will be in Crimea. It will be across the ocean. So this is not something that two nuclear powers can afford to do. But what we can do in Syria is basically cut off the bridge between Iran and Syria and Hezbollah. We've been talking about it for the last many, many years. Unfortunately, this bridge was established after the liberation of ISIS, of ISIS areas, but only to see militias that are linked to Iran taken over. So yes, we are defeating ISIS, but we are inviting Iran to take over, and that was and is a strategic mistake.
I mean, how do you cut it off? I mean, there have been photos of, Iranian Boeing 747, flying in cargo and equipment and people into Syria.
Once you have the zones on the ground under the control of a local force that you are allied with, then the airspace over that zone will be yours. I mean, it's very simple. The problem is that the gap between the Kurdish areas in the northeast and the Jordanian border, that gap is now being seized by the Assad regime, Hezbollah, and the militias on the other side who are pro-Iranians. I think this is a mistake. I think we should close that gap. The entire geopolitical game in the Middle East will change. The Russians will be ready to speak to us with a different angle.
Yeah, and finally, Waleed, there is a new coalition, of Israel, some of the Arab allies, some of the other Arab Sunni nations that have joined basically against Iran. What do you predict will happen? How do you think this will end?
Fortunately, we have this coalition of the Riyadh coalition. When the president went there, spoke with more than 50 Arab and Muslim leaders. Not all of them are going to be on board, practically speaking, but at least the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, it exists. The issue is the leadership. You want to have them mobilizing with us when we are on the ground. The problem, we are not leading them. We are not telling them what to do. And most importantly, we are not cutting off that tie between Iran and Syria and telling the Arabs, come and help us. So we need to begin here. Have a plan, then go see our allies. Look, we were successful in having the French and the British with us, at least in the operation against the chemicals of Mr. Assad. We could do better and faster, I think.
Walid Phares, thank you. Of course, the president and the administration vowing they will continue and press again if indeed chemical weapons are used. Let's hope not. Thank you.
Thank you.